Welcome to Share Your Light. We are live today here with Mr. Damon West, who has a phenomenal story, has a bright smile on my face because I'm already inspired. I've been reading his books. I read The Coffee Bean yesterday via Audible, and I'm also listening to The Change Agent, which was the book he wrote prior to The Coffee Bean. The Coffee Bean he co-authored with John Gordon. And it is just so inspirational. So the story, the rise, the fall, and the rise again. And it helps us with understanding that, number one, people have second chances. Any coach out there, a parent who works with kids, youth who may be troubled, just because everything looks pretty from the outside, it does not mean that there are not things going on internally that we cannot connect with that kid on. And when they make mistakes, let's give them second chances. Because this book gives me the belief in second chances. And also from this, with everybody knows with my process of what I've been going through lately with grief, and even our whole world right now, our whole country with grief and the uncertainty. We don't know if school is going to start back in August. We don't know if sports are going to be going on as normally planned. And so there's a lot of uncertainty that's going on. And there are tools and tips that both books help us to understand with how to control what we can control and how to just go along with the uncertainty and make the most of the time that we have every single day that we have to do something that can impact another life, like the coffee bean. So welcome, Mr. Damon West, to the show.
Hey, Rakaya, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be useful today. And then, look, being useful is important to me. When I was in prison back in 2015, I'm seeing parole, and parole, we're going to talk about all this story, but parole's looking at my file and they're like, look, we don't see a lot of people that come through like you, Mr. West, not through state prison. You had all these advantages in life and all these opportunities and privilege. When you end up in prison with a life sentence, and instead of letting that define you, you changed yourself, you changed the whole prison around you. And she said, I got one question for you, Mr. West. If you could be remembered for being anything in this life, she said, give it to me in just one word, go. And because I was a coffee bean, because I knew my place in the world, because I knew I was there to be a servant leader to people, because I knew that all I control is what I think, say, and feel and do. I don't control these other things around me. I had her answer for her, and I fired it back real quick at her, and I said, useful, ma'am. I just want to be useful. And I can be useful in this world in prison, or I can be useful in that world out there outside of prison, finding those coffee beans. And they let me go. So thank you for giving me a chance to be useful today.
Wow. You just really hit my heart when you said that, because I know there's times that I felt, honestly, I didn't feel like I could make it. I didn't feel like I could go on. I wanted to die. And when I would pray, I just said, God, please use me, to help me so that I can impact somebody else's life. And when you talk about that desire to be useful, when everything is stripped away from you, you think about, why were we even put here on this earth?
Right.
And it's to be useful. It's to have an impact. It's to touch somebody else's life.
There is a term for that, and I live by it. I tell everybody this, when I'm speaking, it's the secret to life. The secret to life is called servant leadership. And servant leadership is helping other people achieve their goals, helping to raise other people up to a different station of life. Because when we're helping other people, really we're helping ourselves. Well, that's when we're at our best. That's what we're doing, what we're called to do. And so I say a prayer every morning, Rakaya. You can have my prayer, because I learned it in recovery. It's certainly not mine. I didn't invent it, but it's the only thing I pray for every single day. I mean, there's times I say the Serenity Prayer, but the only thing I pray for is that in the morning when I wake up, I get on my knees and I say, hey, God, put in front of me what you need me to do today for you. And let me recognize it when I see it. I don't want to miss that, And so by asking God to give me stuff that he needs me to do, instead of worrying about what I need, I know that if I take care of God's needs, he's going to take care of mine. Maybe not my wants, but my need. We could do a whole separate podcast on needs and wants, right? But my needs will be met. And then that's so important in a time like right now. The world's in a pot of boiling water. Your world's been in a pot of boiling water, losing your son. I mean, you're grieving. There's things that everybody's going through something, And if we sit there and focus on on ourselves and worry about what we need, well, we'll go crazy doing that. But if we find a way to pour ourselves into the lives of other people and enrich someone else's life, even just one person every day, it'll change our lives too. And that's where we got to get to a point of doing that. And those are the opportunities that, I tell people all the time, during this coronavirus stuff, especially, people have said, I feel like I'm in prison. I feel like I'm locked up. And physically, this isn't a prison that you're in. I don't care how much home time you get confined to because of the coronavirus. You're not in physical prison. But the hardest prison I've ever seen, and look, you can take this from the fact that I served 7 years and 3 months at a maximum security prison in Beaumont, Texas, or the fact that I went back, when I got out of prison, I went and got my master's degree, and I'm a criminal justice professor at the University of Houston. I teach a class called Prisons in America. I mean, what world does that happen in that an ex-con? I was in a prison in America 4.5 years ago, and now I teach college students, the next generation of criminal justice practitioners, about prison in America. So I can tell you with authority, Rakaya, that the toughest prison in America, the hardest place to do time in this entire country, is the prison in your mind. I meet more people that are locked up by their thoughts and by their things than by steel bars and barbed wire and concrete. More people are locked up by the things around them than the things that they allow them to lock them up than there are in all the prisons in Texas.
Wow. That is a whole word, Damon, that our mind is what'll keep us locked up. Because I know the days that I have trouble getting out of bed, because I still have those days sometimes, and it's a battle between me and myself in my own head.
Sure.
And when I focus on, like you said in that prayer, how can I impact somebody else? How can I practice servant leadership? And it's so crazy that you use that exact term, because that's the term that I use to describe my son. That's his picture behind me. And to think about a 17-year-old embodying servant leadership, when I hear the stories that people told about him, that the things that his friends say about him, the things that he did for others, it's like, okay, I understand and I hear you loud and clear, God. That's what I'm supposed to do, is to continue that legacy that
Sure.
he lived by, of caring more about how he made others feel about themselves than he cared about what they felt about him. And,
Right.
That's what I really feel about servant leadership, because as we serve, sometimes people serve and they're looking for a response or they're looking for something in return. But true servant leadership is, I'm serving you, I'm leading, and I'm not concerned with what I get in return of it, but I'm concerned in what I'm depositing, like that coffee bean deposits into that pot of water. Tell us about the coffee bean for people who don't know what the coffee bean represents.
Boy, Rakaya, so here's the deal. In my life, I can speak, I use I statements a lot. So in my life, I can tell you that God never once reached down, put his hand on my head and said, hey, Damon, you're healed. God has never done that for me. And it's just, some people talk about that's how God heals them. Didn't happen for me that way. What God has done, though, in my life, and I think he does with a lot of other people, is that he puts people in your life. God will put people in your life. Your son's one of those people that God put in your life. That God will put people in your life to help get you from one stage of life to the next. These people, when we're younger, we call them coaches. We call them teachers. These are the people that guide us around. Parents are like that too. Mr. Jackson was a guy I met in Dallas County Jail. And I'd just been sentenced to life in prison. On May 18, 2009, I got a jury in Dallas County sentenced me to life in prison for organized crime for my role in a bunch of meth-related burglaries in the uptown neighborhood of Dallas. They called them the uptown burglaries. A bunch of very affluent people were getting burglarized, and I was doing it for 3 years. And so a jury, after 6 days of trial, Kaya, the jury went and deliberated for 10 minutes on my sentence. 10 minutes. I don't know how much Law and Order you watch, but if a jury's gone for 10 minutes, they smoked you. And when I came back in that courtroom, they gave me 65 years like it was nothing. 65 years is a life sentence. First felony conviction, I got life. And so my parents get 5 minutes with me after the trial's over, and I'm in this little glass, got a bulletproof glass between us. This little room I'm in was got a bulletproof glass. And, a little background on my parents, how I was raised. I came from a privileged background. My parents have been married 52 years. This past June was 52 years for them. So I didn't come from a broken home. I had every advantage, every opportunity growing up in life, white middle-class guy in America gets. And my mom was a school teacher, then she was a registered nurse. And my dad was a sports writer growing up for 50 years. He was the first sport. It wasn't just any sports writer. He was the first sports writer in this part of Texas to put black athletes on the front page of a sports page. First time he did it was in 1971. People freaked out. They started cutting his tires. They started breaking his windows. And growing up, I had these parents that were thrusted into civil rights, and they raised us the right way. They raised us properly. And my dad would make my older brother, my younger brother, and I sit down and read his box of hate mail that he saved. He still got it in his house. All these hateful letters people wrote about putting, what they felt about him putting black athletes. This is 1971, but if you close your eyes and think, we haven't traveled that far since 1971 in America. And so I was raised by good people. And so when I'm sitting in that little room with that bulletproof glass separating us, and I just got handed a life sentence by a jury in Dallas, my mom and my dad walk in. They've been there for the whole 6 days of trial, and my dad's in stunned disbelief. He can't believe what he's seeing. So my mom does all the talking. And she says, baby, she said, debts in life demand to be paid. She said, you just got hit with one hell of a bill from the state of Texas. She said, but you did the things they said you did at that trial, Damon, so you have to go and pay that debt to society. You owe that debt. She said, but you owe your father and I a debt too. She said, we gave you all the opportunity, love, and support to be anything you want to be in life, and this is how you repay us. Well, we just saw, she said, it's not going to work, Damon. She says, so here's the debt you're going to pay to us. When you go to prison, you will not get in one of these white hate groups, one of these Aryan Brotherhood type gangs, because you're scared because you're the minority in there. She said, you were raised in Port Arthur, Texas, a giant melting pot of a city. We gave you a great moral compass, which you've chosen not use. So you're going to start using that moral compass today. You're not going to get any of these gangs, and you're not going to get any tattoos while you're in there. And Rakai, I show people my arms all the time. Man, I was in the joint for almost 10 years, man. These guys want to tattoo every inch of your body. These guys are like, hey, Wes, man, we put a tattoo on you. Like, hey, dude, I can't do it. My mom said no. So, yeah, every time. So my mom told me, she said, Damon, no games, no tattoos. She said, you come back as the man we raised, or don't come back at all. Now, you're a mother, guy. You know how hard that is for a mother to say that to her son. But she's looking down the barrel of this guy going, this child of hers going into a prison, and the environment is toxic, She said, do you understand the debt you're going to pay? And I said, yeah, Mom, I got it. But I didn't, man. I was crying my eyes out. And so I get back to the pod in Dallas County Jail. And I'm asking all these guys that have been in prison before, hey, man, how am I going to survive? What can I do, And every guy, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, tell me the same thing. Man, you're going to the worst part of the Texas prison system. Everybody in the building you live on, they call it the life sentence building. Everybody's got life, man, and everything in prison is about race. Man, get to one of those white gangs, man. Get where you belong. That's what they're telling me. Everybody belongs with their own race, right? But there was this one guy, this older black guy named Mr. Jackson. And Mr. Jackson, man, Mr. Jackson was probably in his 60s. I don't know his real age, and I don't even know his real name. He went by the name Muhammad. A lot of those guys change their religion in there. They become Muslim, and they change their name to a Muslim name. So I don't even know what his real name is. So I call him Mr. Jackson for the sake of the story. So Mr. Jackson is sitting there telling me, he says, West, he said, I've been watching how you're dealing with these knuckleheads and these dummies, talking about you to get into a gang. He said, do not listen to these fools. He said, but let me lace you up with what prison is going to be like. He said, prison is like a pot of boiling water. He said, I want you to imagine prison as a pot of boiling water. He said, anything we put in that pot of boiling water, what's going to be changed by the heat and the pressure inside that pot. He said, I'm going to put 3 things in that pot of boiling water and watch how they change. A carrot, an egg, and a coffee bean. And so he walks me through it, Rakaya. He says, if I put a carrot in that pot of boiling water we call prison, he said, what happens to the carrot? I said, well, it turns soft, Mr. Jackson. He said, that's right. He said, the carrot goes into prison hard, but the prison changed that carrot, man. It turns him soft. He said, the carrot got beat, he got robbed, he got raped, man, he may have gotten killed. He said, you don't want to be the carrot. He said, what about the egg? I said, well, the egg turns hard, Mr. Jackson, like a hard-boiled egg. He said, that's right. He said, the egg has a shell that's going to protect it physically. He said, but inside that soft liquid core, his heart becomes hardened. He said, if your heart becomes hardened, you're incapable of giving or receiving love. And he said, if you're incapable of giving and receiving love, you have become institutionalized, and you will not come back as someone your parents recognize because your eggshell has swastikas tattooed all over it. He said, what about that coffee bean? And I had no clue. Rakai, what happened to a coffee bean in a pot of boiling water. And Mr. Jackson said, he said, Wes, if I put a coffee bean in that same pot of boiling water we call prison, he said, now you have to change the name of the water to coffee. Because he said the coffee bean, the smallest of these 3 things, he said, small like you, West, had the power to change the entire atmosphere inside that pot. He said, everybody in life puts out energy. negative or positive. He said, whatever kind of energy you put out, you attract back. It's called the law of attraction. He said, so if you want to walk around prison with a mean mug on your face and a scowl all the time, you want to look hard, what you'll actually do is attract that same kind of hard inmate. He said in prison, that could be a very dangerous, even deadly endeavor, especially where you're going, that part of prison. He said, but Wes, if you walk around that prison with a smile on your face and you let those guys know they're not getting to you, no matter what they do, they can't get to you. He said, man, you'll change that prison from the inside out. And he said, the best part about it is the other coffee beans in prison, the other positive inmates, man, they will find you because of your energy. And the last thing Mr. Jackson told me, Rakaya, before I got to that prison bus, he said, West, go out there and go be a coffee bean. And that was it. That was the biggest life lesson. And here's the deal. If Jackson is shooting me straight, if he's leveling with me and he's shooting me straight, that means that the power to change this situation, maximum security prison in Texas, man, about as hot of an environment as you can go into. That means the power to change that situation is really inside me. It's not in the hands of the criminal justice system. It's not in the hands of the guards, not in the hands of the other inmates. It's inside me. I have to give it to them if I let them change me. But the power is inside me. And if the power is truly inside me, then maybe I won't survive prison, but maybe I can thrive inside that prison. And I think we know how the story ended. I think we know that it is possible to change any environment you're in with your own energy, man. You impact that world that you're going into everywhere you go. And the world's in a pot of boiling water right now, Rakaya. No one can tell you alive on the planet what's going to happen next. We have never seen something like this before in our lifetimes. And so no one knows what's going to happen next. We don't control those variables. No one from the White House has called me to ask me how to handle the coronavirus. I wish they would, but no one has. But the thing about it is I don't control that. But what I do control, I control 4 things. I control what I think, what I say, what I feel, and what I do. And if I control my response to what's going on, then I'm going to be okay. And I'm going to be useful to other people. Okay?
Wow. Control what you think, what you say, what you feel, and what you do.
That's it. That's all you control. Your whole world stops at your ears. That's it. I mean, everybody gets this illusion that, I've got all this control over all these other things. I learned this lesson in prison. I'm in recovery now, a 12-step recovery program. And we have these meetings, and I still go to them in the free world because recovery is my life. But we start our meetings off with this prayer called the Serenity Prayer. And the Serenity Prayer, have you ever heard the Serenity Prayer, Rakaya? It's a beautiful prayer. Yes. It's probably one you've said a million times. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So this guy said he's going to break down the Serenity Prayer. He's going to diagram that prayer that morning at that recovery meeting. So he draws a line from one side of the chalkboard to the other. And he said, that line, Damon, represents God's line. And God's line, he said, is way bigger than that chalkboard. It's infinitely long. He said, the first part of the prayer. He said, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. He said, the things you cannot change, Damon, are on God's line. And God's line, every time you try to touch something on God's line, you hurt yourself and you hurt other people because you are not God. You can't play God. He said, so stay off of God's line. Then he went and erased a little inch out of God's line. And he held his fingers up an inch apart after he erased on the chalkboard. He said, Damon, if God's line is infinitely long, your line is to scale. You get 1 inch of that infinitely long line. He said that little 1 inch line is called humility because he said humility is defined as being right sized. He said, because when we are right sized and we know our place in the world, we are humble, we are useful to each other, to other people again. And he said, on your little 1 inch line are the things that God gives you to work on every day. This is what God's going to allow you to do. And he said, the second part of the prayer, the courage to change the things I can. He said, the things you can change are on that little 1 inch line, and there's 4 of them. They're the 4 things you control in life. He said, they are what you think, what you say, what you feel. And he said, most importantly, everybody's going to see what you do, Damon West. What you think, what you say, what you feel, what you do. He said, if it's not one of those 4 things, then it's God's. You let God deal with that. And he said, the last part of the prayer was most important for us addicts and for a lot of people is the wisdom to know the difference between the big line and that little line. How many days, Rakaya, have you woken up and you thought, man, this is, you're going to try to tackle something that's not even on your line. And sometimes that paralyzes you to even get into action. It does it to me all the time. I don't wake up being the coffee bean. I got to remind myself that I wake up a lot of days and I'm the egg. I'm the carrot of the egg. Most of the time I'm the egg. But I've got to stop myself and say, hey, Damon, you know what? You don't control those things. And the things you do control, you better get started controlling them because your day's wasting away. But what I do know too, Rakaya, is that I can restart my day at any time. 10 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock at night, I go find a mirror and I look at it and I say, hey, dude, you don't have to live like this, man. You stop this right now. Go be a coffee bean. Done. And that's it. I just restart my day because I don't have to live like that. Neither do you.
That is a big key. And I just told a mom yesterday who said that she was having a horrible day. And I was just saying, you know, as long as we don't have too many of those bad days in a row. So like if I had a bad day yesterday and today when I wake up and the day is going bad again, I have to do something to reset it for myself. Otherwise, it's like you said, I'm surviving but not thriving. I'm surviving but not really living and being useful.
Yeah, and that's the whole trick of life, right? I mean, that's if you can figure out a way to get through that and be productive every day and be useful, then your days will not only will they go by better, but you'll find more purpose in life, and that's really what it's all about. You know, when I told you about God not healing me, putting people in my life, there's another person He put in my life. My first cellmate in prison, a guy named Carlos. Carlos is a little bit. About 5'2", a little Hispanic guy, a little bank robber from San Antonio. But Carlos was a dangerous dude. Don't let his little size fool you. Carlos he's lethal. But Carlos is a good dude, man. He's my cellmate. So one night, I'm telling Carlos about the coffee bean. We're in our little 10 by 12 cell. I've got the bottom bunk. He's got the top bunk. And when I tell him about the coffee bean, he jumps down from the top bunk. Super animated little guy. And he's like, oh my God, I love this coffee bean story. He said, but you're no coffee bean, Damon. I was like, well, what do you mean, man? I want to be a coffee bean. He said, well, you're not going to be a coffee bean, not with the way you think. He said, you have to change the way you think if you want to change the way you act. He said, because all action is born of thought. And thoughts without action, they're just thoughts. And you have thousands of thoughts you never act on. And he gave me this riddle, He said, hey, West, 3 frogs are sitting on a log. One of the frogs makes a decision to jump. He said, how many frogs are left on the log? I said, well, there's 2. I mean, one of them decided to jump. There's 2. He said, wrong. There's 3. All 3 frogs are still sitting in that log because that frog that made a decision to jump never took any action to jump. He said, you're that 3rd frog right now. You've made this decision. You want to be this coffee bean, but you don't know how to be a coffee bean. He said, you got to change the way you think. You got to quit looking at prison as a punishment and start looking at prison as an opportunity. And I looked at Carlos again, a second head, Rakaya, and I'm like, what do you mean, man? We're serving a maximum security. We're in a maximum security prison serving life, man. This is a punishment. He said, this is your opportunity, Wes. He said, you may never get an opportunity like this again. You got 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to work on yourself and become the best human being that you can be. What are you going to do with this opportunity God's put in front of you today? He said, if you will wake up every day and just say that out, say, hey, God, thank you for this opportunity today, and get to work on yourself. He said, you'll change your life. So I woke up the next morning, Rakaya, and my feet hit the cold concrete floor of the prison cell. And I said it out loud. God, thank you for this opportunity. And this opportunity to work on myself today. And I started doing it. I don't even know if I believed it at first. In fact, I know I didn't believe it at first. But I got it the next day and did it. The next day. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. And months became years. Like you said, you can't have too many of these bad days together. But if you start having a bunch of these good days together too, these positive days, they don't have to be great, but they're days that you made some progress. You move forward, even if it's just an inch. You know, we're making progress. That becomes habitual too. And so, you know, I tell people all the time, you have to find the opportunities. Inside of every dark, tragic, adverse situation, there are opportunities. And that's what we have to find. Your son passing away gave you an opportunity, gave you a platform to continue his life and help other people and help. Like you've just told me that you've talked to another mother. You're helping other people through this tragedy. You found the opportunity. And that's what life is all about. We find those opportunities. Right now, with what's going on, we haven't seen the worst of this, Rakaya. We haven't seen, because right now rent protections are running out. You know, we may shut down again, but the economy can't take much more. There's a lot of ways to die, Rakaya. I mean, coronavirus is just one. Poverty is another way to die. Hunger is another way to die. And we're going to start seeing a lot of that stuff now because we're seeing things that have been done to the economy that the long-term effect of this, it's going to be with us for years. There's about to be a lot of pain. And so we've got to find ways to look for opportunities in that because there's going to be a lot of people that coming in help. Here's a story about that too. So Do you remember Mr. Rogers, the children's television
Yes.
show guy? Did you watch
Yes.
that growing up? I don't want to date
Yes.
your age, but I mean,
Yes.
I'll be 45 in October. So I watched this dude in the 70s and 80s. I watched Mr. Rogers. I'm not going to lie to you. The little goofy sweater and the shoes, he would change them out at the beginning of the show. I love Mr. Rogers. But before Mr. Rogers was Mr. Rogers, children's television show guy, he was a Presbyterian minister. And he said this happened to him, it was in the early 60s. He said he went to a church service one Sunday, and he said they had a substitute preacher come in. And so he sat through the substitute preacher's sermon, and he said this substitute preacher's sermon, when it was done, he thought to himself, that was the worst sermon I've ever heard. He said it was terrible, Rikai. He said it went against every rule of giving a good sermon. I almost put him to sleep. And just as he was about to turn to the woman next to him and tell her how terrible this guy's sermon was, he stopped. He bit his tongue because the woman next to him was in tears. She was in tears, Rikai, and she told Mr. Rogers, she said, that was the most beautiful sermon I've ever heard. She said it was the absolute right thing I needed to hear at the absolute right time in my life. She said, I will never forget where I was this day that I heard this sermon. And that's when Mr. Rogers realized that no one person can reach everybody, but every one of us can reach one person. Even that bad preacher that day, that terrible sermon could reach one person. He said, we all have the gift. We all have the potential to reach one person. But he learned another very important lesson that day, Rakaya. He learned that while he was coming in judgment that day, she was coming in need. So many people are coming in need right now, Rakaya, and they're going to keep coming in. And if we can find a way to fill that need with things that have happened in our life, we look for those tragedies in our life to build upon that, to find those opportunities. We got so many people out there in need right now, Rakaya.
Right. So many people in need, and there's so many people going through it. Like when you say poverty, you look at not only coronavirus, but also the protests and the, racial things that have happened. It's a boiling pot. It really is.
Absolutely.
It's a boiling pot. And if you look at, because I know you do a lot of talks to teams and athletes and youth, and you look at athletes who right now, a lot of them have used sports as an outlet. And I know for you as a college football player, it was an outlet. And
Sure.
I don't know if when your career ended, if there was any turmoil within yourself that led to more negative decisions, but some of the athletes are at a point right now that they have to make decisions to be that coffee bean, to control the things that they think and feel and not let that negatively impact what they do, because the things that they would positively use their energy for is not there right now. And so some of them have been explaining that they feel lost, that they feel a lack of purpose because they've always thought that their purpose was playing sports. And now they have to look at other things in life that they can be impactful with. What would you say to athletes right now, or even coaches, to have that opportunity to impact those athletes who are going through that turmoil?
A couple of things. First thing I would tell them is that, you can't wrap your identity up in things that are not things that aren't real. Like to wrap your identity up inside your sport, your position you play, the sport you play. I did that before, and it was terrible. It was tragic. When I got hurt against Texas A&M in '96 and my college football career was over, I went to a tailspin. I got into more drug use and more hardcore drugs because I wrapped my identity up in being a football player. And that's not what when we wrap our identities up, let's use more real world views. Wrap our identities up in things like our job, our home, our car, things that can be taken away from, things that we can lose during the pandemic, during a global economic depression. We can lose those things. But if we will use our lives, if we wrap up our identities into things that can never be taken away from us, things that are important, things that we can identify with that enrich us, like our faith, our relationships we've built along the way, and our ability to serve other people. Hell, faith, relationships, and ability to serve others, those are three things that no pandemic, no economic downturn, hell, no prison sentence can take away those three things. I walked out of prison with those three things and nothing else. I had my faith, my relationships, and my ability to serve other people. And that is what the foundation I've built a new life on. And as long as I remember that I'm going to be okay, because I'm never going to get to a point where I feel like it's seemingly hopeless, because those things can't be taken away from me. And another thing I would tell these athletes, this is one of the reasons I want to get in front of so many athletes and talk. I've been doing this for over a year with this part of the message. One of the things I've been able to do since I've been out of prison is I get to take some collegiate collegiate athletes that have substance abuse problems or have problems running them with the law into Texas maximum security prisons. And the TDCJ has allowed me to do this. The NCAA has partnered up with me. First kid I took was from the University of Georgia. He was a linebacker named Natrez Patrick. And Natrez Patrick, he got arrested for possession of marijuana in October 2017. And when it happened, the Georgia football team called me up and said, hey, will you talk to Natrez? I was just there to talk to the team, okay? I said, yeah, of course I'll talk to Natrez. So I get on the phone with Natrez, black kid, inner city Atlanta, grew up around marijuana all his life. He said kind of a cultural thing. Everybody around him did it. And he didn't understand what the big deal was. And I told him, I said, Natrez, look, man, you're in the system now, man. You can't afford to be in this. You're a black man in America. You can't afford to be in this system. So I called up the coaches of Georgia. I said, look, man, I don't know what you're about to do. And they said, well, we got to suspend him for 4 games. I said, this kid's about to be a statistic. You're going to lose this kid. I said, I'm going to a Texas maximum security prison next week. Give him to me for a weekend and let me take him into prison with me and show him what the consequences are of his behaviors. And so the head coach, Kirby Smart, signed off on it. The AD signed off on it. The kid's mom signed off on it. They shipped Natrez back to Texas with another coach that came with him. And I took him inside of maximum security prison. And I told Natrez on the way to that prison when we were driving in that morning, when you walk into this place, I want you to see how many black faces look back at you, Natrez. I said, African-American men make up 6.5% of the population of this country. 13% of the population is African-American, but 6.5% of the population is men. And I said, I want you to look back at this population, look back at you, because almost 50% of this population you're about to see is black men. And said, in America, 1 out of every 4 black men in America is in the criminal justice system, Natrez. And you just got yourself inside that system with the choices you're making. I want you to see the reality of that today. And man, it floored Natrez. It floored him. It opened his eyes to it. He was shocked. So when I go in front of these teams now, I get to the end of my presentation. I say, hey, guys, look, man, you can take what I'm about to say by the fact that I've served almost 10 years in a maximum security prison. I got a PhD in the School of Hard Knocks, man. I lived through it. Or you can take it from the fact that I went back, when I got out of prison, I got a master's degree in criminal justice, and I'm a criminal justice professor at the University of Houston teaching a class about prisons. But let me tell you this, man. If you're a black man in America, you cannot afford to do the things that you see your white friends. You can't do some of the goofy things that kids do growing up because your buddies are doing it that are white. You can't do that, man. This is a machine with teeth, and it wants you inside of it. Because there's not one criminal justice system in this country, y'all. And I tell this every time. There's a black one, there's a white one, there's a brown one, there's a rich one, there's a poor one, there's one for cops, man. It just depends on who you are on the spectrum. It depends on what kind of justice you're going to get in this country. And I said, I'm not here to change the criminal justice system. I can't do that. I don't have the power to do that. But what I do have the power to do is lay it down for you and tell you what the consequences are of your decisions and how to avoid getting the system, because you cannot afford to get your fingerprints or your mugshot in this system. It's a machine with teeth, and it wants you in it. And by the time I'm done, I'm asking these guys, are y'all picking up what I'm putting down? And every guy in the room is like, yes, sir. I'm like, good, man. Because sometimes some people's purpose is to be an example of what not to do. And that's my purpose. My purpose is to both be an example of warning to others of what not to do, but a message of hope. When I was getting ready to leave prison in 2015, one of my old cellmates, this black kid from Dallas, man, named Sabor. He was a Muslim guy named Sabor, man. Another Muslim guy.
A lot of Muslims had a lot of impact on you.
Man. That's it. And so he was one of my old cellmates. And man, so Sabor, he's like, man, congratulations, Wes. I'm so. And he's my age. He's the same. I call him a kid, but we're both young in prison. And so he said, hey man, look. He said, I got one question for you, Wes. He said, are you gonna talk about what you saw in this place? Because we would stay up at night. He was so intelligent. I stay in touch with Sabor all the time, and I put money on his books, writing letters, sending books. Very educated guy, man. He's self-taught too, man. But his worldview was so advanced for someone that had spent half his life in prison. But he was a very well-read guy. So we would talk all night about social justice and everything. He said, Wes, are you going to talk about what you saw in this place? I said, Sabor, man, you know I will. When I get on my feet and I get this platform built up, you know I will. And what he told me has never left me, Rakaya. He said, good. He said, sometimes they lock up the right guy. And that was the last conversation I had with him in person. And I mean, that always stuck with me, Rakaya. Sometimes they lock up the right guy. I do believe I am that right guy to help get some of these messages across and the realities across, because obviously God has blessed me with the ability. No one's ever coached me on how to speak to an audience. No one's ever taught me how to write. Maybe I got some of that from my dad being a writer growing up, or reading a lot of books. But the change agent, that's all my writing, man. I just sat down and started writing that thing, and it came out the way it did. That's God, man. And so, but I have to be available to that. I have to say, you know what, no matter how good things get in my life, I can't stop and just relax and say, well, I'm not going to share this message anymore, because that message can save someone's life, and it can change the course of someone's life.
And what you just said, it ties back into like that opportunity. Sometimes we lock up the right guy. Sometimes we look at the things that go wrong in our lives and we're asking God, why did this happen to me? But sometimes it's that you are the one that pain was designed for. And I don't know if you would be the person that you are right now, Damon, had you not gone to prison.
I wouldn't. I'd be probably divorced a couple of times and just an alcoholic and a drug addict, going through life. I mean, I was not made. If I wouldn't have gone through prison, I wouldn't have gotten into recovery. And if I wouldn't have gotten into recovery, I couldn't have any relationships that are meaningful, because every relationship in my life before recovery was about me, man. Relationships are a two-way street. I didn't even know how to have a relationship until I got into recovery. And I started learning that, it's about a give and take. It's about a compromise, and it's about love. True love is about compromising and sacrifice. I didn't know anything about that. I was the most selfish guy in the world. When you get done with a change agent, I tell people all the time, do not put that book down at the halfway mark. You're going to hate my guts if you do, because the change doesn't happen yet. The change that takes place, the conversion, happens after about halfway in the book. Man, please read through the halfway mark.
Yeah, no, I can't stop it. It's good, but what you're saying though is like sometimes that purpose is found in the pain. I think I just posted that last week. You found true purpose, like you're writing, you're speaking. Yeah, you were doing things, you were working on political campaigns and things like that before, but the impact, like you are touching so many more lives that are in pain through your pain that might not be able to hear this message from someone else that has not experienced that type of pain. And when you talk about what you saw in prison, I when I was younger, I'm from Chicago originally. I live in Houston now. But I used to volunteer in Cook County Jail with my aunt. She had a right to passage program, in the jail. And one thing that really stuck with me, what I saw in jail was it was women, violent offenders awaiting trial. And most of them were had suffered abuse in their childhood. And I don't know if in the male side, because when I speak to schools and when I speak to teams, I address a lot of that trauma that exists that we don't see looking from the outside, but that kids who are doing certain things have had trauma in their life that has not been resolved. And I know the statistic for females is 1 in 4 have had some sort of sexual abuse in their childhood. I don't know if on the male side of prison, is there a lot of abuse that landed people there?
Here's the things that I saw, and even when I was studying for my master's, it goes into that quite a bit in some of the classes. 80% of the people that are locked up, and the men that are locked up, have substance abuse issues. Substance abuse, about 80%. But when you get to the women's side, it's more like 95% of substance abuse issues, because they've got co-abuses going on with sexual abuse, and they've used alcohol and drugs to deaden the pain of that, right? I mean, and I think the numbers are way higher than 25% of women that have been sexually abused that are in the criminal justice system. I think it's probably closer to 85%. I mean, you find a lot of women that are in the criminal justice system that have been abused in some way by a man. The most detestable kind of inmate I ever ran into the entire time are the ones that call themselves pimps. These guys were the scum of the earth, Rakaya. I mean, these guys, you wouldn't pee on their heads if their heads were on fire. They were that detestable because of what they did to women, man. What they did to women. And I never wanted to be around people. You could give me a cellmate any day of the week that was a murderer. Give me a cellmate that was a bank robber, something like that. But don't give me somebody that was a child molester or someone that raped women or a pimp. Because here's the thing. If I can't wrap my brain around your crime, I don't want to be around you, man. And I can wrap my brain, crazy as this is, I can wrap my brain around murder. Because, I mean, I think everybody on the planet has had a homicidal thought or two. You just don't act on it. Someone makes you mad. You're like, man, I'd like to kill that SOB, but you don't do it. But these crimes these other people have, child sex crimes, crimes against women, rape, and being a pimp, man, my mind doesn't work like that. I've never even had a thought of something like And if I can't even wrap my brain around it, I don't want to sleep anywhere near you, man. So, but these women have been through hell in a lot of cases, Rakaya, and bless you for doing that. My mom, when I was locked up, she got into volunteering at the Jefferson County Jail here where I live in Southeast Texas, doing women's ministry because she knew her reasoning with that was that someone was looking after her son while I was in prison. She wanted to look after someone's daughter. So very cool that you did that.
Yeah. Wow. And when you talk about the substance abuse issues, yes, that is a lot of times, like you said, even with the women's side, deadening the pain that they've experienced. Because when I say the 25%, that's 25% in society. That means like in high schools, that means the kids that have not made it to jail yet. So that's our opportunity as coaches and as leaders to help those kids who have had this trauma before they end up in jail. And that's how I ended up. So it was through that experience working with my aunt in the jail that I ended up coaching and teaching, because after that, she started a charter school. And I asked her, why did you stop going into the jail? Why did you start, working at a school? And she said, because she realized that by the time they got to jail, it was so far gone. It was so hard to really make a huge impact. And she realized that by getting them younger, getting them in the schools, like what you're trying to do with going and speaking to the teams before those kids end up in jail, you have a really big purpose and mission to help them never have to end up being that statistic and being in jail.
Yeah, you want to try to when she was talking about it, what you're talking about with what I'm doing is you try to reach someone beyond the criminal justice system. Before they get into the system, you want to try to catch them before that happens, and that takes all of us. It takes a village. We talk about, you hear people say it takes a village all the time, but I tell people all the time, there's not a lot of white speakers that go around say the stuff I will say. But what I've done, what I'm willing to do, because I feel like I've got these credentials, I've got street cred, I've got this amazing currency to spend, and I can go spend it, because there's not a person alive that can say, well, he doesn't know what it's really like in there. Hell, I lived in there, man. I know what it's like. Or he doesn't know what it's like to have real time. I got a life sentence. So what are you going to tell me? But what I do when I talk to these teams about that stuff, especially with the multiple criminal justices, the white one, black one, brown one, rich one, poor one, cop one, what I'm doing, the black players, the black athletes in that room, they understand what I'm saying. They know this already. I'm not saying something earth-shattering to them, but what I'm doing is I'm validating what they're saying, because they get to hear someone that looks like me say something that they know is true, but they don't hear enough people that look like me saying that, and we need more people that look like me talking about this kind of stuff, because that's the only way it's going to change. When people that look like me start saying the stuff that I'm saying and then start doing something about what I'm talking about, that's when real change is going to happen. But it's going to take white people to do that, And when I'm doing that in the room too, because it's not just an all black room, there's white athletes in that room too. I want them to hear someone that looks like them saying the stuff that I'm saying, because I want them to see, hey, you know what? We need to start getting out and doing that. And it's going to take, Rakaya, it's going to take a lot of people getting outside their comfort zones to get some real change in America, especially with race in this country. Because what we saw with the murder of George Floyd, that's just one instance that we have that we can talk about, that we can see. How many more of them are there? There's other ones that we've seen that we didn't get upset enough about. This goes on all the time. And until we have people that look like me getting off the sidelines and getting in the game, you're not going to get any change.
Yeah, I remember after the George Floyd incident happened, I remember you tweeted something saying, you committed real crimes and you were never treated like that when you were arrested.
The Dallas SWAT team, man, they came in and got me. I mean, I was a thug, man. I was the head of an organized crime ring. I'm breaking into people's houses, man. I'm a real criminal, an active criminal running a criminal organization. And man, all they did was jump through my windows and everything with a SWAT team, put their boot on my chest and put a gun in my face. But man, I got treated better than George Floyd. George Floyd didn't even do anything wrong. I mean, it's insane how much differently we were treated and how different we were in front of the cops. I was a real, they came with a search warrant for me, man. All they had with George Floyd was a guy call in and say a $20 bill had been spent that was counterfeit. So yeah, you look at that, man. And why? What's the big difference? What was different in George Floyd and I? Man, I'm white. So, I mean, I'm not afraid to talk about it. And I honestly, it's one of those things that I feel like sometimes they lock up the right guy.
Yeah, sometimes they lock up the right guy, and sometimes the pain is given to the right person because, it's like what, pick up my cross and bear it. You are carrying it and you're doing something with it, as opposed to, there are a lot of people who might get out of jail and say, okay, this is unfair, life is over for me, and they give up. But for you to say, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to get a master's degree, I'm going to, become a professor, I'm going to work at a law firm, these kind of things. It's like something, that coffee bean mentality really, really took root. And you're having that impact on others. When you were in jail, did you have that impact already inside the jail with the coffee bean mentality?
Yeah. I mean, there's people, look, I mean, I write an article for the prison newspaper called The Echo. And this newspaper has been around since the 1920s, and every inmate in prison in Texas gets a copy of The Echo every month. And they came to me back in October and said, hey, you're an author, a best-selling author. Will you write an article? And I do. They give me a space. I call it the coffee bean. It's my little article, and I can talk to the inmates directly. I've got my mailing. I got a PO box. They can send me letters. I get tons of inmate mail, and I got a letter the other day from a cellmate from 2010. This Hispanic guy. He was, and I'm thinking back, man, this guy was my cellmate for about 2 weeks. He said we were just barely, because he got himself rolled. He got caught with some dope, and a lot of guys in there get into the game. They get caught up with that stuff, and so he got caught up. He got rolled from my cell. But he said, man, in that short time, I remember you telling me all about the coffee bean. And you were telling me how you're going to get out, you're going to be this coffee bean, and you're going to be a coffee bean while you're in there. He said, man, you did it, man. And that was 2010, man. I was telling this coffee bean story to people all throughout prison and trying to make that prison into a pot of coffee, and it worked. It worked in the sense that parole noticed it enough. Parole even said, man, you changed your life in here. You've changed the prison around you, man. What are you doing? That's when she said, what, I got that one question for you. So, but yeah, I mean, that's a way of life for me. That's a way of life for me, because it's almost biblical. It's almost like the mustard seed parable, right? Because the mustard seed was the small little mustard seed. But every one of us, man, like Jackson said, man, this coffee bean, the smallest of the carrot and the egg was the coffee bean. And he said, small like you. That lets you know that the size, your heart, everything like that, your ability to get through something doesn't depend on your size, your finances, or anything like that. It's inside you, man. Everybody has that power to impact the world around them in a positive way. But we have to let go of what it is that we think we want and be there to do what God needs, that kind of thing.
To do what God needs. Yes. And that reminds me too, with like, when you think about like Mothers Against Drunk Driving, you think about Trayvon Martin's mom, you think about Adam Walsh's dad, with all of these parents, like even from my situation, who had this tremendous pain, and these movements have been started that have impacted society for, if you think about Adam Walsh, for decades, for my whole life. I will never forget the name Adam and what happened to him. Yeah. So in our pain, we have a decision to make. When we see the pain, do we retreat? Do we hide? Do we become the carrot that gets soft? Do we become the egg that gets hard? Or do we let that pain transform us, that pot of coffee or that pot of water, transform us into what we're meant to be? We might not even be who we're meant to be yet, but through that pain, we go through a metamorphosis and become something even greater than what we ever imagined. Absolutely. This isn't what I want. It's not the life that I want, but I'm not going to let it be for nothing. I'm not going to let my son's life be for nothing.
Right. You're going to turn that situation into a pot of coffee, because, it's hard. And look, man, here's the truth, Micaiah, is that you're going to go back and forth in life. You're going to be the carrot. You're going to be the egg. It's like grief, you're going to go through the 5 stages of grief. There's nothing that says when you get to the 5th stage of acceptance that you're done with it. No, you can slide back to denial, accountability. You're going to go back, denial, anger, bargaining. These things are going to keep happening all your life.
And sometimes all in one day.
Sometimes all in one day. One of the coolest things I ever saw was a Whataburger commercial where this guy gets up to the counter. This is when I was in prison. I saw this commercial. I thought, man, someone is really creative. This guy goes to the counter to order a Whataburger, and they tell him that his burger's been discontinued. It's not there. They're basically saying they got rid of a burger. They got a new one. This is their way of introducing it. And the guy's like, no, that's okay. Just give me that burger. And they're like, sir, it's not here. And then he gets angry. He's like, but I want my burger. And they're like, sir, we're done here. What if we did this? He starts bargaining with him. You know, he's going through the 5 stages of grief over a burger, you know? But it was really neat because at the end, he's like, okay, what other burgers do you have? And he introduced the new burger. But they did the 5 stages of denial, anger, bargaining, you know? What was it? What's the fourth one? There's something in acceptance.
Bartering?
Grieving.
Did you say
Denial, anger, bargaining, grieving, or something like that. But it's the 5 stages of grief, but the guy went through them in the Burger King line. I mean, he just went through it over a cheeseburger. So it was a really cool commercial. David
Kessler, who was involved with the 5 stages of grief, he just had a new book come out, and I'm in the middle of that one as well. And he added a 6th stage of grief, and it's called Finding Meaning. So it's exactly what we're talking about now, like that pain and finding meaning and purpose in it all, that it doesn't end with acceptance, even though you still cycle back through those 5, but you also can find meaning in it all. So I saw one of your things in the book. It said that you in jail, let's talk about a few of the concepts that helped you. You said that you were going to do the time, right? But you weren't going to let the time be meaningless.
Yeah. So Carlos told me one of the first day I was there, he said, the first rule about doing time is you have to do your time. You can't let your time do you. And what that means is you have to fill your days up, Rakaya, with things that you think are important. Otherwise, your day is going to fill up with things that are not important. They're not. Your day is going to fill up regardless. And if you don't fill it up with the things that are going to enrich you and make you grow, you're going to fill it up with wasteful things. You're going to find your day wasted on social media, watching the news, sitting around watching the walls. I mean, that's how people find themselves locked up. Man, define what your day is going to be about. You know, do your time. Don't let your time do you.
Right. And then you said, even though I won't get well, I can get better. That really resonates with me, because like a lot of mothers out there are people who are going through grief. And I keep saying mothers, but there's a lot of kids out there who are going through grief right now. Grief has a lot of different ways that it can present itself. It can be a death. It can be, like you said, loss of income. It can be loss of, our normalcy. But I know there's even a few teams here in the area that have lost athletes recently. I can name 3 in the last 2 weeks that have died recently. So those kids are going through grief. But for us to know that we might not get all the way well, but we can get better each day.
Right. And you're never going to be the complete person you were when your son was alive. You're never going to be that person again. That person is gone in your life that made you complete like that. So you'll never be well in the sense that you'll be whole like that again. But you can be better. You can be better every day. That's a choice. And it sounds so hard to say it's a choice, but it really, truly is. And you have to get through the pain to get to the point where you're like, okay, I'm going to make the choice. I'm going to get up and go. I'm going to put one foot in front of the other. Rakaya, sometimes, and I can't speak to what you've gone through because I've never been through the pain you've gone through, but I've been through pain before. And I tell people, in AA, we have these quirky little sayings, first things first, easy does it. But one of the sayings we have, you said it earlier, one day at a time. But the truth, Rakaya, the really truth to getting through trauma and getting through life, and even for me was doing time. And sometimes on these coronavirus days, it's not one day at a time. Sometimes it's 20 minutes at a time. It's 5 minutes at a time sometimes. Man, I got to stop and reboot. And sometimes it's 1 hour at a time. But I'm going to get there. I mean, if I have to every hour remind myself, all right, Damon, you can do this. Get up, go do this. One foot in front of the other. I'm going to do it. And sometimes it's not one day at a time, Rakaya. Sometimes it's chunks of 15 minutes,
Wow. 15 minutes, 1 minute, one step, one breath, all at a time. Yeah. And when you talk about the one day at a time and those breaths and those moments, there are certain things that you described in the book that helped you get through the days. And it was like a routine. I think you even talked about going to sleep at the same time, which coronavirus has messed it up for us because my sleep schedule is all over the place. But getting that routine to where like you pray, you meditate, you pray again. Can you talk a little bit about how that helped you getting through the one day at a time? Because I think that might be something that can help a lot of people by developing a routine of being intentional and making the choice to heal.
So the guys that I saw in prison that had the most difficult time they were doing, they always looked at a date somewhere further away. Man, the date that I'm gonna get out of here, my parole date, the day my sentence is up, or, you know, I'm up for parole again on this date. Those guys did hard time, you know. The guys that I saw were getting through each day and living, and they had a smile on their face, and they were looking at chow time, you know. They were looking at when we're going to chow. You know, that's something immediate. That's going to happen that day. When are we going to rec? When are they going to call us out for chapel? They're talking about stuff that's happening that day, you know. They're living in that day. Man, they're talking about the chow hall. They're talking about commissary. They're talking about the chapel. They're talking about the rec yard. Yeah, they're not talking about parole. They're not talking about a court hearing. They're not talking about, you know, visitation this weekend. Man, they're talking about today. So living in the day, I had a lot of examples around me of what to do and what not to do. And so every day I try to get into the same routine and try to just do that daily. And getting into a routine gave me something to look forward to at the next step. Like, okay, so I got this part of my routine. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to work out, and then I'm going to shower, and then I'm going to go to chow, and I'm going to read a book. Before you know it, it's 9:30 at night. It's time for me to go to bed. And then I'm going to wake up the next morning at 4:15 with no alarm clock because my body is set to do that. And it became one of the most meaningful things. And I've told people over the whole coronavirus thing, get into a routine. Get into a routine. Go to bed at a decent hour, man. Get some rest. Take care of your body while you got this time on your hands right now. And get up every day at the same time you were getting up before, if you can. You know, we're not on vacation. We're here to try to get ourselves to a routine of getting better. You never take a vacation from getting better.
Right. Wow. So get into the routine and try to go. I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that tonight. I'm going to try to go to bed, because I was like in my process doing a little bit better when I was out and about before this whole shutdown happened. So getting into that routine is definitely good. And then the prayer and the meditation. Can we say that prayer that you offered us a little earlier one more time for anybody out there?
Absolutely. God put in front of me what you need me to do today for you, and let me recognize it when I see it. And that's it. That's the only thing. I ask for two things every day from God. And guess what? God has never not given me something he needs me to do, because my eyes are wide open looking for it. If I get towards the end of the day, I haven't found anything to do for him, I'll start, man, were you really looking throughout the day, Damon? Because there's a lot of stuff going on out there. God's never not given me something to do that day. If you ask for it, you look for it, it's going to be there for you. Wow.
Thank you so much, Damon. This has been truly a blessing to me. And I see a lot of the comments that, you know, getting a lot of feedback that just, it's been really touching for people. If people want to reach you, they can find you on, you want to say your social media and your website?
Twitter and Instagram at Damon West 7. My website is damonwest.org. If you want to get in touch with me about speaking to your group, your team, your organization, I'm doing a lot of virtuals now. Everybody is. I mean, they're converting stuff to virtual. My books, the Change Agent and the Coffee Bean, are available anywhere books are sold. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, stuff like that. I got another book coming out in November with John Gordon called The Coffee Bean for Kids. And it's going to be a book about these little kids in elementary school that learn how to be coffee beans, because the world's a changing place. And we thought, you know what, we'll write a book for kids. I mean, we don't even know what school's going to look like in a couple months in fall, but we're going to give them the blueprint for being a coffee bean in terms they can understand too. Children can get it, and parents can give it to them.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Let's see, we got a few. Tanisha Rogers says, love that. We need that for the high school kiddos.
Absolutely, Tanisha. We'll get it to them.
And wow, from Paige. Awesomeness from Jewel Upshaw.
Hey, Jewel.
Jewel, actually, I don't know if you heard of Zeke Upshaw. He was in the G League of the NBA, and he passed from sudden cardiac arrest a couple of years ago. So, yeah, definitely another advocate. And she said, thank you, so informative. This really touched, I mean, anybody going through any type of adversity, I know that they got plenty of nuggets from it. This will be available for replay, and it'll be on Twitter and on YouTube. So go ahead and share the video, share it with somebody that can benefit from this. And thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much, Damon, for sharing your story with us.
Oh, Rakaya, thank you for the opportunity to be useful. And look, that's the thing about pain. Pain is relative. If you say it's the worst pain in the world, then guess what? It is the worst pain in the world. No one can tell you what pain is worse than the pain you're going through. So don't ever let anybody do it. Your pain is real, And pain demands to be felt. That's one thing I learned about pain. It demands to be felt. But go through it, get on the other side of it, and find something productive and useful to do with it, because there's opportunity inside that pain. Right?
Absolutely. Thank you
Yes,
so
ma'am.
much.
Thanks for
Thank
coming.
you.
I
All
really
right.
enjoyed it. Thank you. Be a coffee bean.
Thank you. I will. Thank you.
Bye.